It is officially fantasy football semifinals week, and if you are listening to this episode, you are one win away from competing for fantasy glory. And on today's episode of the Regression to the Mean podcast, we have our top 50 wide receiver rankings in tiers for week 16. I am your host, Shaun Moran, and I am joined by my co-host, Keegan Thompson. And for this week and this week only, my fantasy football arch nemesis, Aidan Haller. Aidan, how you doing today, man?
I'm nervous. Just gonna get right to the point. I'm nervous. The squads are banged up. Me and Shaun are squaring off in two semifinals this week. It's probably like two of our bigger leagues, I guess, in terms of like buy-ins and just like really just pride. Just a lot of the fellas from college, a lot of chirps. Me and Shaun are being gentlemen, as I'm sure you guys could imagine. You know, we're classy men, but I'm ready to rock, Shaun. May the best man win this week.
Yeah, nothing but respect.
Respect.
Aidan, I'm still not over what you did to me on Christmas Eve day last year with James Conner. The both of
James
you,
Conner.
actually. James Conner ruined my Christmas.
That was tough for you.
Getting double James Conner was pretty brutal. I got Greg Dulcich in that game too. No one talks about that one. But Keegan, how you doing today, man?
I'm good. I'm relieved of like most football stress. I mean, the Jets are an absolute dumpster fire. I don't have to pretend like they're going to do something this year and make me excited. Down to one team in fantasy playoffs after Shaun completely dismantled one of my rosters. I've gotten over the stress of fumbling some roster management. So I'm excited to just talk about football and not think about how it directly impacts me anymore, because the season was a grind and I think it beat me up, but I'm over it. You know, it's just, who cares, right? It's just fake money. You know, I don't pay real money for these leagues. Who would do that? You know, who would invest so much time and money just to get beat and made fun of by your friends? But that's why we play, right?
Look,
fake money.
Keegan's being modest. Keegan's having by far away out of the three of us the best ball year. Keegan's advancing a ton of the teams that he's drafted, so he's doing quite good in best ball. So he's a modest man. But yes, I did kick his teeth in.
What people don't tell you, or what I tell people, is 66% advance rate in BBM. What I don't tell people, 3 entries.
That's still crazy that you.
The holder of the mouse did pretty well. Keegan had all the power, and Keegan made all the right moves on his end. So
he advanced 2 BBM teams on 3 tries. That's nuts. Good for Keegan. Before we dive into the rankings of today's episode, if you are like the 70% of people that watch this channel and don't subscribe, go ahead, hit that subscribe button. We have a goal of 1,000 subscribers. And we can't get there without you tagging along for the ride. So if you haven't subscribed yet, you know what to do. Also, like this video. If you have any questions, sit. Any questions like where did Keegan buy his hat? Drop that in the comments below. If you are new to our rankings show, our format is pretty straightforward. I have ranked the top 50 wide receivers for week 16, and I've broken them into tiers. I'm going to take you all tier by tier and share thoughts on guys that I'm higher on and lower on versus consensus. And along the way, Keegan and Aidan are going to highlight some of the guys that they think that you should be starting or sitting this week. If you are watching this video on YouTube, you're going to see the rankings. And on these rankings, you're going to see a bunch of different data. So along with where I've ranked players, you're going to see the opposing defense that a player or receiver is going to play. You're going to see where that opposing defense ranks against wide receivers, how many points per game they give up to wide receivers. Along with that, you're going to see expected fantasy points per game rank, and you're going to see fantasy points per game rank over the past month. Expected fantasy points is essentially a metric that evaluates a player's usage and determines how many points they should have scored. It's a super useful stat that allows us to find regression candidates. My rankings also lean pretty heavily on the last 4 weeks of data. I find that data from the beginning of the year isn't as accurate as fresh data for players that have really come along as the season's progressed. An example of a player whose usage at the beginning of the year is night and day versus now is Rashee Rice. He's like a wide receiver 6 in PPR production right now. At the beginning of the year, guy was getting like 3 or 4 catches per game. With the last 4 weeks of data, I can more accurately give you guys the best possible data. Lastly, each tier is timestamped. So if you want to jump around feel free to go to the tier that you have specific start-sit questions or want to learn more on, and really just want to make this content as relevant as possible to you. And as always, if you want to see more of these rankings and get a little bit more in-depth, the rankings to this episode are below in the show notes. All right, guys, ready to jump in?
Let's rock and roll.
I get goosebumps whenever you say that, Aidan. Just truly goosebumps. All right, so when I'm looking at week 16 wide receiver rankings, I think two guys really here are standing out as the cream of the crop, the 1 and the 2 in the tier 1 of wide receivers. And I have Tyreek Hill and CeeDee Lamb. So the Cheetah didn't play in week 15. Jaylen Waddle went absolutely nuts against the best secondary in the NFL. This week, he is going up against a Dallas secondary that has given her up around 24 fantasy points per game to wide receivers, which is the 27th fewest amount of points to wide receivers. But I am not too worried. I think this game could become a shootout, and I think he's going to take CeeDee Lamb for a ride, even though both these defenses have been Miami's been fine against wide receivers. Dallas has been stingy. I just feel pretty good overall about a shootout in this one. Guys, thoughts on this specific tier? Do you think I am being too exclusive with tier 1? Do you think any other guys should be here joining Cheetah and CeeDee in week 16?
The only guy I could maybe argue is AJ Brown. I think we've seen him come back down to earth a bit over the last couple of weeks. He had that stretch in October and early November where it was like consistent 20+ point games, and I think this is a really good spot for him. Obviously, the Eagles are sliding quite a bit. Giants secondary is it's not very good. They made some nice plays on Monday night, but the Eagles' offense is better than Seattle. There's kind of no ways to sugarcoat this. I think A.J. Brown could have an absolutely massive game. This feels like a really nice get-right spot for them. I think like the two guys, like Tyreek and CeeDee, they're wide receiver 1 and 2 on the season for a reason. They're both getting like 10+ targets. It's like absolute volume, just like maniacs. But if I had to put anyone up there, it'd personally be A.J. for me.
I'm all good with these top two, Shaun.
All right. If Keegan's good, I'm good.
It's a little bit of a weird wide receiver week. Like it's hard to pinpoint who I think is kind of stretching themselves farther away from the competition, but I do think you've got the top two right here. So
moving on to the next tier, Aidan touched on it. AJ Brown is in this tier. I have him as wide receiver 4, but the next tier is wide receiver 3 through 6. I've got wide receiver 3, Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver 4, AJ Brown, wide receiver 5, Justin Jefferson, and wide receiver 6, Stefon Diggs. So really the big name that I want to call out here is Amon-Ra St. Brown. He has a juicy matchup against a Minnesota secondary that has surrendered 29 fantasy points per game to wide receivers. He'd had a kind of a little hit or miss back-to-back weeks in the Amon-Ra St. Brown world where he's not, getting his 18 to 20 points. It was more of like 10 to 12. But he went nuclear against the Broncos, and that was in a game in which his tight end caught 3 touchdowns and he still went off. I feel very good about this game, played indoors against Minnesota. Minnesota's defense is good at stopping the run, not great at stopping in the pass. I think the Sun God, he might be back. So I'll pause at this specific tier here. Any call outs? I know, Aidan, you called out AJ Brown. Keegan, is there anyone that's speaking to you here in this tier?
Yeah, I want to talk about the Sun God. I like to bring up some coverage statistics for wide receivers and running backs when I can, but pulling this data from Fantasy Points data suite, if you guys haven't used that, you got to check it out. It's like one of the best ways to analyze like different aspects of the game that you might not be thinking of when you're looking at your fantasy matchups. But for Amon-Ra, you mentioned, comes off a heater from Denver, kind of getting out of his little mini slump. Vikings deploy the second or the highest rate of cover 2 coverage in the league, 29.2%. And Sun God is averaging kind of 3/4 of a yards per route run. So a little bit less than yards per route run against cover 2, and a 20% target share on 54 routes. So it's not a huge sample size, but there are some ways I think for the Vikings to stop him or kind of slow him down. But they're also giving up the second most receptions and 15th most receiving yards per game to receivers lined up in the slot. So this is a big opportunity for Sun God to continue kind of his hot streak here. So Vikings have been a pretty stingy defense. They're not the worst. They're
lately.
not
They're
the
good.
best. They've been good. But I do like Amon-Ra as well this week. And then this mini tier here with Jefferson and Diggs. I think Diggs will probably bounce back. It's unlike him to go this many games without kind of a true blow-up game. I'm still worried about ranking Jefferson this high coming off of injury. Obviously, the Nick Mullins played a good game last week, but it just feels really high for JJ.
His stats were better than I remember. Like, I watched the game, and I was just looking at it again. He caught 7 of 10 targets for 84 yards.
It was still really good.
And I don't remember it being like, I don't remember seeing that much Jettas. So, like, my main takeaway from this tier is, like, I'm just really excited to watch the 2 NFC North receivers go at it. If I had to guess, I think JJ outscores ARSB personally. I think, like you mentioned, Keegan, the Vikings defense has been really stout lately. The Lions defense is trending the wrong direction. So I'd be willing to bet JJ outscores him, but I'm just really excited to watch these two go at it. It's, 2 marquee like wide receivers in the game right now.
Must-win game for Minnesota. Their playoff odds drop to, I think, 24% if they lose. So big game for them at home against the division rival. I do not believe in this Detroit secondary, and Nick Mullins looked fully capable of feeding Jay Jettas, which I think the Pastronaut was a little concerned about. And then Stefon Diggs is a major regression candidate. Wide receiver big 17 time. Usage, 39 production. This is such a get-right spot. This is basically going to be a Bills home game. If Bills fans want to come to LA, they're going to take over the stadium. This is the Chargers' first game without Brandon Staley. I think the Bills are 12-point favorites. They're going to roll them. I feel like if there was a week for Diggs to get back on track, it would definitely be this week. Before we dive into the next tier, today's episode of the Regression of the Mean podcast is brought to you by Chalkboard Fantasy Sports. We can't stop playing this Chalkboard Picks game. Aidan and I are just chalking our board all day, every day, sending each other, building slips, sending each other ideas. It's a good time. So essentially, you can win up to 100x your money by simply choosing more or less on the projected stat lines of your favorite NFL players. If you played Prize Picks or pick them on Underdog, it's super similar. But what makes Chalkboard Picks unique is the fact that they offer alternate lines. So, for example, this Thursday night, we've got the Rams and we've got the Saints at SoFi Stadium. We think this game is going to be a shootout. We're going to get into this a little bit more with Olave and Kupp later on in the episode. But we want to bet on the passing games for each team here. So if you go ahead and download the Chalkboard app right now, link is in the description of this video, you can take Chris Olave's receiving yards down from 62.5 to 39.5. You can take Cooper Kupp's receptions down from 6.5 to 5.5. And you can take Alvin Kamara's receptions down from 4.5 to 3.5. And you can create a slip that is cashed 73% of the times this season. And if you put $10 on that slip, you can double your money up to 20. You can sign up for the Chalkboard app in the link in the description, and you can use promo code RTM for up to $100 in bonus bets, aka free bets, aka free money. All right. Got to take advantage of this. We are riding with this slip. We are riding with Chris Olave, Cooper Kupp, and Alvin Kamara. Come on. Like taking it down to 3.5. Alvin Kamara gets like 18 targets a game from noodle arm Derek Carr. So it's going to be a fun one. Come ride with us on Thursday Night Football. All right. Moving on into the next tier of guys here. Wide receivers 7 through 10. I've got Mike Evans, DJ Moore, Calvin Ridley, and DK Metcalf. If you guys have noticed, I've made smaller tiers this week. I just felt like it was necessary to delineate from the different wide receiver options. This is big for the mean team. We got to make sure they punch their tickets, right? I guess the really only guy I want to call out in this tier, and this is probably my biggest move against consensus rankings this week, is Calvin Ridley. I've got Calvin Ridley at wide receiver 9. He's the biggest positive regression candidate on the board, fellas. He's the wide receiver 2 in usage over the past month and the wide receiver 34 in production. Something's got to give here. Christian Kirk's hurt. Zay Jones is hurt. I think Trevor Lawrence is trending towards playing, and Tampa Bay has just gotten absolutely lit up by wide receivers this season. They are a pass funnel defense. They're willing to give up a ton of passing yards and stop the run. So I'm very high on Calvin Ridley in this range. Anything standing out here in this tier?
Yeah, for Calvin Ridley, yes, he even week 15 specifically is his expected points was ridiculous, and his performance was obviously not so great for your fantasy team. A really good opportunity for him, specifically as an out wide receiver. Buccaneers are giving up the 4th most receiving yards per game, 128.5 receiving yards, and the 5th most receptions to receivers aligned out wide. So this is a pretty good opportunity for Calvin Ridley. And for measure, last week, Dontayvion Wicks tuned in 6 receptions for 97 yards in that exact matchup out wide. So good opportunity for Calvin Ridley, who I think is much more of an alpha than Dontayvion Wicks. So if he can do it, why can't Ridley? And then DJ Moore. What a good
baby.
What a good week for him. That's for sure. He's definitely on my radar as somebody I'll be paying attention to. I think has a pretty nice opportunity this week. 5-run game with 22 plus fantasy points in full contest with Justin Fields. It ended last week. He only had 4 for 52 on 8 targets against the Browns, but Browns are a good defense. Cardinals,
they're the best defense in the NFL. The Browns are the best defense in the NFL.
And 4 for 52 is not a bad day in real life. Obviously, it's not what you want in fantasy, but right now, Cardinals, pretty good matchup. Last time they faced somebody similar to DJ yards after the catch type receiver. Deebo went 4, 48, and 2 in that matchup last week. They're 12th most receiving yards per game, the 13th most fantasy points per game to wide receivers. So great opportunity for DJ Moore here.
Yeah, I love the DJ spot. Bears can't run the ball very well right now, which is like one of the things the Niners did really well. Brock still threw for like 250. And it felt like there was like a lot of meat on the bone, but like McCaffrey was just feasting. I don't think the Bears are going to run as well. So yeah, I see a big game from DJ. I think if you're in the semifinals, I'd feel pretty good with both Justin Fields and DJ Moore this week.
I think it's a great spot for them.
Yeah, I think it's huge.
The Cardinals are just a bad defense, so it's a big spot for the Bears.
They're just a bad team, man.
They're well coached though, but yeah, they don't have the guys. The next tier that I have here, wide receivers 11 through 14, is just the 49ers and Rams receivers. It's kind of lazy,
no idea
but
what to do here.
Deebo at wide receiver 11, Brandon Ayuk wide receiver 12, Cooper Kupp wide receiver 13, Puka Nacua wide receiver 14. Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk remain negative regression candidates. They continue to dunk on regression and be highly efficient. Ayuk has kind of come back to earth over the past month as the wide receiver 30 in points per game. This is a bit of a tough matchup against Baltimore, but you have to think Ayuk's going to get going a little bit here soon. And then Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, it's a good spot for the both of them. Nacua continues to see a better role in terms of expected fantasy points. He is 15th in usage to Cooper Kupp's 27th, but Cooper Kupp is running much hotter right now on touchdowns. Cooper Kupp is the wide receiver 12 over the last month, whereas Puka Nacua is wide receiver 28. So I'll pause here. Any thoughts on this specific tier?
Yes, going with the Puka and Cooper Kupp thing, I think we're kind of seeing it shift back to Kupp. I mean, 3 straight games with 8+ targets. We had 8, 10, and then 8. Obviously turns that in for 111 yards and a touchdown last week.
On that big touchdown. Huge touchdown. Yep. Well, Puka's had over
there wasn't a guy within 20 yards of him on that touchdown.
Yeah. Puka's had
out of control.
Puka's last 3 games, 7, 9, and 8. So I don't know if I'm buying this narrative that Kupp's taken over. But. And
I like the Kupp spot as well, too, based off some coverage. The Saints will be deploying a pretty high rate of man coverage. They're 6th in the league in deploying man coverage. And Kupp is the clear leader in the clubhouse at almost a 30% target share against man coverage. And he's averaging almost 2 yards per route run on 94 routes against man. So it's been a good run for wide receivers against that specific type of coverage. And it's obvious that Cooper Kupp is kind of the preferred target in there, but the both of them should have their way with the Saints this week. I think Matthew Stafford's just on a hot streak. I would not want to see the Rams in the playoffs, to be honest.
Do not at all.
I think that they could beat Dallas if they played them in the first round.
We talked like in fantasy about Matt Stafford, and we kept saying, it's coming. The touchdowns will come. I mean, he's throwing for 300 yards and
What's
no
the
touchdowns.
Word for that?
And here he is.
What's the word for
it's
that?
called. He's regressing his mean right now.
Matt Stafford and the Rams are regressing their means for sure.
They have a huge game this week. Like the winner of that game is like pretty locked in.
Yeah.
Whether it be them or the Saints, like whoever wins that game is going to the playoffs. Like it'd be pretty hard to fumble if you win that game not making the playoffs.
That's the other thing too, is we're in that weird time of fantasy season where, I'm starting to not think so much about weather games, especially when somebody like Matt Stafford playing. I'm starting to think less about the defenses they're facing, like from an overall rating standpoint. Maybe not so much coverages because that's important to me, but people are fighting for playoff spots or they're fighting for first round buys. Like the best version of the team that they hope will show up at any given point.
They're turning it up.
So
they're turning it up for sure.
It's really hard to discount, like Shaun brought up, like, yeah, the Niners have a tough matchup, but am I going to sit here and think like Brock Purdy and their skill players are going to drop a dud because it's a tough matchup? Absolutely not. Like all options are on the table for these. So just be wary of that when you're trying to make roster decisions.
Start your studs always and forever, folks. Start your studs. If they're not studs, then we got to go back to the drawing table a little bit, and that's what we're here to help you with. But yeah, I agree. Moving on to the next tier here, I've got wide receivers 15 through 18. 15, Rashee Rice. 16, Jaylen Waddle. 17, T. Higgins. And 18, Chris Olave. Chris Olave has been pretty efficient over the past month. I feel pretty good about this matchup. The Rams have been pretty friendly to wide receivers. He is a positive TD regression candidate. Olave has close to 1,000 receiving yards, only 4 touchdowns. I feel like if there was ever a week for Olave to run into a couple touchdowns, it could be this week in kind of a must-win game. He is going to play. I know there were some issues with his ankle, but I feel good about Olave. Anyone else in this tier that you guys want to call out before we jump to the next one?
Got to be the highest you've had, Rashee Rice, all year, huh?
And T. Higgins.
He's earned it.
It's the highest.
I wasn't going to bring up the T. Higgins thing.
My arch nemesis made the catch of the year, and now he gets a cake matchup versus Pittsburgh. You got to have T. Higgins as like a borderline wide receiver one. With Jamar Chase out, it's the hate needs to stop for me when Chase is out. But yeah,
I just think it's good to see Rashee Rice up this high in the rankings. It's like all year, just playing more. Like the usage, slowly but surely, like climbing his way up the ladder. And I think the Chiefs have finally figured it out.
Yeah, it was like a 90+ like route participation. I think finally it was like, dude, and it worked. It was like the dude popped off. It's like he's the only reliable wide receiver in that room. It's pretty sweet.
Do you know who he reminds me of? Rookie Deebo Samuel. On to the next tier here. Wide receivers 19 to 26. And I know how crazy that comp is, but I'm just telling you, he reminds me of rookie Deebo Samuel. Wide receivers 19 to 26. I've got Davante Adams, wide receiver 19, DeVonta Smith 20, DeAndre Hopkins 21, Amari Cooper 22, Garrett Wilson 23, Josh Palmer, welcome to this tier, my friend. Wide receiver 24, 25, Courtland Sutton 26, Chris Godwin. Yeah. Josh Palmer and T. Higgins getting major jumps. I've buried my Josh Palmer.
Let's not put T. Higgins and Josh Palmer in the same sentence there. The only reason they belong in sentences because Shaun hates them both. So
I've dropped my Josh Palmer hate. He's had a really good year when he's been healthy. So
Shaun straight up last year told me in the middle of the season, like, Josh Palmer's just not good. He's just never going to be good.
He was so frustrating last year. But I
it's like the Billy Madison list of the guy with like the kill list. It's like T. Higgins and Josh Palmer are both on the list. So hopefully
Josh Palmer,
indeed.
He did nothing wrong outside of the fact that he was like getting way too many targets in an injury.
Shaun was getting mad that a wide receiver 3 was playing like a wide receiver 3, and he was like, "Oh, I hate this guy."
Well, he is back now on the menu. He is very high up the rankings, in my opinion.
Like the main course.
He's the main guy. He's the main guy this week. He is like he's the fillet. Wide receiver 2. Yeah, he's an easy wide receiver 2 this week, in my opinion. Keenan Allen hasn't practiced yet this week. They have nothing to play for. They have a head coach whose name is Glyph or Glyph. I don't know.
It might be Jeff. It might be pronounced Jeff.
It might just be my name is Jeff. It might just
my name is Jeff.
Yeah.
I feel really good about Palmer this week. I feel good about Chris Godwin. Where the hell did that come from? That was insane. A 26 burger in the first round of the playoffs for Chris Godwin. Shout out, a legend.
Season high in every category. It was like,
really wish you would have saved it for next week.
Yeah, and believe it or not, the offense looked good. It was like they used the middle of the field. They used Mike Evans on deep stuff, and like it was how we expected the offense to look. Where has he been? Like, he's been healthy this year. Where has Chris Godwin been? And he's got a pretty cake matchup this week. So Chris Godwin, welcome back.
They remembered that they could throw screens to him and use him over the middle of the field. And it was like, oh, yeah, this guy's like actually really good if you just get him in some
Buccaneers
space.
went wild in the pass game last week. Baker, 4 tutties.
I really enjoyed it.
Perfect
Green
pass
Bay.
rating. That was crazy.
Green Bay's defense is so trash. They let Tommy DeVito and Baker Mayfield be the NFC Player of the Week in back-to-back weeks.
Just badass stuff. Badass stuff.
Moving on to the next tier, guys, here I've got wide receivers 27 through 30, a.k.a. all of these guys are on the same team for me, and I have no idea who to start. Wide receiver 27, Drake London.
No,
wide receiver
again.
28, Jordan Addison.
He's a rat.
Wide receiver 29, Zay Flowers, and wide receiver 30, Diontae Johnson. So just this tier, my main call out is Drake London.
This is against me.
No. This is against Pud.
Okay.
I've got
I'll
Diontae
go
going
then.
against you. My main call out here for Drake London. I hate Arthur Smith so much. Like, I hate him so much.
It is.
I hate his stupid face.
It's the "this is the end" clip over and over again.
I really do not like Arthur Smith. When I see that his stud wide receiver has the wide receiver 37 usage over the past month, it makes me so frustrated. I don't care if your quarterback is blind, deaf, or dumb. Get the ball to Drake fucking London, dude. Just you're overthinking it. You don't need to run Drake London, Kyle Pitts, and Bijan as decoys so you can scheme up some dude named like Fitzsimmons for like a 50-yard completion. I don't even know what he's doing. I hope he loses.
You know those
the Heim is
fired
confirmed,
so
right?
bad.
You know those NFL like slideshow things I send you guys, like the TikTok videos? Fitzsimmons guy is like, there's going to be one soon that's like, blah, 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 Fitzsimmons, future slideshow participator.
I caught a 50-yard ball. This tier is welcome back, Jordan Addison. That's exciting. Zay Flowers, what the fuck was that last week? That was insane. Guy was got like a 30% target share when Mark Andrews is out and he gets 2 targets. I don't know where that came from. And then my thing with Diontae Johnson is Mason Rudolph comes in and he targeted DJ like 3 or 4 times. Did he complete a single pass? I don't think so, but I think a ton of volume is coming DJ's way. And I think George Pickens is like going to be borderline benched soon, which could just mean 10 plus targets for Diontae.
He's a problem.
He's got issues.
He just wants better. I don't blame him. I'd act the same way if I had to catch balls from Kenny Pickett.
No
you got to be a professional. You
cannot do that in the NFL.
Bro, we don't say that about other star wide receivers that are really good at football. Maybe he's not a star. You know what I mean?
That. And he's not a star.
Bro, DK acts like that like every weekend.
DK is like so many tiers above George Pickens. Like,
I know, but I'm just saying.
It's insane.
I'm just saying we can't get mad at players who like.
Yeah, you can.
Oh, whatever. I mean, I'm not going to pick him apart for one run block that he missed. I mean,
oh no, I'm not either. It's just this idea. I was watching.
It's
this idea that his teammates don't seem to like him. That bugs me. When
I wouldn't like
Warren's,
anybody in Pittsburgh either, except for maybe TJ Watt. The rest of that team sucks.
Nah, Jaylen Warren's like, I would have blocked for George Pickens. I was like, damn, that is brutal. Like you don't want to let your teammate down.
He said I didn't want to get Tank Dell. Shut up, bro.
What?
You just don't like blocking.
All right, this is getting a little hot takey for fantasy football sakes.
Yeah,
but
this is just my gripe with George Pickens. Moving on to the next tier.
Moving on to the next tier of guys here, wide receivers 31 through 38. I've got Jaxon Smith-Njigba 31, 32 Tyler Lockett 33, Noah Brown 34, Jakobi Meyers 35, Jayden Reed 36, Terry McLaurin 37, Curtis Samuel 38, OBJ. Jaxon Smith-Njigba, is the breakout coming? I don't know, but his usage is better than Tyler Lockett's, and his production is better than Tyler Lockett over the past month. It may be Jover for Lockett. That came pretty swift. He had a great year last year, and he just fell off a cliff this year.
Just keep selling houses, dude. You had a good run.
Keep selling houses and writing poems.
Yep. He writes poems
about being a virgin. Okay, so Noah Brown.
What?
Yeah, Keegan and I dove into this last year. Tyler Lockett was a virgin for quite some time. All respect.
Let's take this offline.
Team no sex. The dude, he probably started having sex this year, and that's why he's not good. That's probably what happened. He lost his edge. That's why I'm crushing it with these rankings.
Literally
I haven't felt the touch of a woman in years. Okay, so Noah Brown, you probably want to get him into your lineup if Nico isn't playing. I know it's a brutal matchup against Cleveland, but if you're in a league with 2 flexes, Noah Brown's probably going to see like 7 or 8 targets like he did last week. He had 22 fantasy points. Jayden Reed, if he plays and Watson doesn't, you got to move him up, but he didn't practice and he's got a toe injury. And then Terry McLaurin, great to see you had a nice breakout game in terms of usage, but if you play McLaurin this week against the Jets, seek help.
Good luck.
Yeah, seek help. The only guy who beats the Jets is Jaylen Waddle because he's the fastest guy alive. So that's really it for this team.
That was like the first blown coverage I've seen, like massively blown wide receiver coverage that led to a big play for the first time this year.
He got cooked. I mean, that's like,
and that's
that
DJ Reed, like all pro corner.
All pro.
And
Waddle is so good, dude. The way he can change like directions, just like subtle hip movements at full speed. It's just, he leaves guys on skates. It's crazy how fluid he is when he's at full speed. Okay. Any thoughts on this tier before we get to the last 2?
I got nothing here. Kind of a weird group here.
I wouldn't want to play any of these guys except Jayden Reed. Jayden Reed, Noah Brown are interesting.
Like Noah Brown, maybe.
They could be good usage plays. The next tier guys that I have here, 39 through 43, I've got Josh Downs, Dontayvion Wicks, Adam Thielen, Romeo Doubs, and Brandin Cooks. The only guy that I think is interesting in this tier, in my opinion, is Dontayvion Wicks. If Jayden Reed were to miss time and Christian Watson weren't to go, even though it's a rough matchup against Carolina, who's been stingy to wide receivers, you're looking at maybe like another 7 for 90 opportunity game for Dontayvion Wicks. I think he's very interesting. Any thoughts on this tier before we get to the last guys?
Welcome back to Earth, you dustball, Adam Thielen.
Never wrong.
I
wrong.
Fully rescind my we apologized. That was super heartfelt. That was from the bottom of my heart, Adam. And you suck again. No, I'm
we
kidding.
capitulated so hard, and I think he has like 200 receiving yards since he had like 700 to start.
It's gotten pretty dark. Yeah,
dark.
He just ran out of juice.
The offense, basically, they just decided to just run the ball every single play to protect Bryce Young. That is the offense now. So they just
is Pittman going to play?
I am not projecting Pittman in. If he does, slide him up the ranks. He's in this Mike Evans, DJ Moore, Calvin Ridley, DK Metcalf tier, in my opinion, if Pittman plays. If Pittman doesn't play, Josh Downs, you're probably putting him in this tier with Drake London, Jordan Addison, Zay Flowers, and Diontae Johnson.
Falcons are giving up the 13th most receptions to receivers aligned in the slot this year.
Keegan's got the nuggets.
Adam Thielen
from the suite.
Adam Thielen from the slot last week and went 4 for 43 in that matchup. So that's not a terrible fantasy day. And if Pittman doesn't play, definitely upgrade Josh Downs. I agree. Subbing him in over, anybody top 26 and up. But I could sub him in over Drake London or maybe Zay Flowers just because of matchups and environment. But
yeah, I think he's firmly in this. If you're watching purple tier, the perp tier, the last group of guys
double
here,
cup tier,
pour that bubbly. Okay, so wide receivers 44 to wide receivers 50. I've got Wan'Dale Robinson, Tyler Boyd, George Pickens, Demario Douglas, Nico, get it well, Rashid Shaheed,
say his name.
Davis.
Yes.
Tyler Boyd is someone you could talk me into moving up. Pitt is terrible against slot receivers, and Tyler Boyd pretty much exclusively plays from the slot. I probably could jump him up into this tier with Jakobi Meyers and Noah Brown, honestly, and I probably will after this. Outside of this tier, it's been back-to-back goose eggs from Gabe Davis, so a spike week's coming against the Chargers. You just know it's going to happen when literally no one starts him. So, interesting tier here. Any thoughts on these guys before we jump?
I think it's a Gabe Davis week. Aidan O'Connell just Aidan O'Connell just threw for 4 tutties and 300. He looked like Tom Brady out there against this Chargers defense. I don't care if they just got a new coach, whatever. inspired football. I think Gabe Davis, you're probably not in the playoffs if you've been playing him anyways. But like your consolation bracket with Gabe Davis is going to go crazy.
You can even start him in the consolation bracket. You've got.
I would love a greedy Gabe Davis blow up in my 5th place game. That would be awesome.
Oh, but that's going to.
He's like a drug, dude. Gabe Davis is the drug of fantasy football. Like, it's not good for you, but if it hits, it hits.
Don't start Gabe Davis. Don't do it. But you're right. He's had 3 goose eggs in his last 5 games where he's not recorded a single point. I don't really get it. I don't get it. But that's going to do it for this episode of the Regression of the Mean podcast. If you have any specific start-sit questions on wide receivers, running backs, tight ends, you name it, quarterbacks, defenses, drop them in the comments below. We're going to be available online and answering any and all questions you may have to help you punch your ticket to the fantasy finals. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Until next time.
Bang, bang.